This is Chick2Chick Uncut, raw and unfiltered.
Hi, everyone. I'm Flora Posteraro, the host of Chick2Chick Uncut. Many of you may know, and for those of you who don't know, I used to be a television news anchor and reporter. It's something I did my entire life. It's something that I wanted to do since I was a little girl. And so that's what I did my entire life. I was a TV news anchor and reporter, but I still have kept up with news, and I'm very aware of what's going on because I report for an online publication called penwatch.org. So when we had those two plane crashes, the plane crash in DC, and then less than 48 hours later, the plane crash in Philadelphia, I was glued to that, and I was reporting on that. And what I don't think that people realize is that as news people, watching these tragedies unfold and having to report on them, it's hard. And it really takes a toll on us. And a very good friend of mine, Ellen Kolodziej, we used to work together at a television station many, many moons ago. And she's now a TV news reporter for the Fox affiliate in Philadelphia, is my guest today. And Ellen, first of all, thanks for coming on the podcast. You were on the front lines of the plane crash in Philadelphia for 2 days. What did you see? What was that like? Talk to us about that.
Well, Flora, let's just preface this all by saying you were one of the best reporters I've ever worked with. Top notch, so professional. So I hope that your viewers know that. So let's just get that out of the way. And I'm not just, saying that. So yes, we worked together many moons ago, but we still have 28. So there you go. Let's just get that out of the way. Right. So yes, I have been doing this a long time. I have covered many, many tragedies in my day, unfortunately, but I was not there the night that it happened. I was not there Friday night. And I have to tell you, having covered so many tragedies, I was actually glad. The old Ellen back in the day when I was 23, first doing this, I would have wanted to be there. But now at my age, I have to tell you, I was glad to not be there Friday night. But I was there Saturday and Sunday, and I was the lead story on Fox 29 in Philadelphia both days. So I actually did not, and I have to tell you again, being older now and wiser and more seasoned and a mother of grown children, I did not cover the victims and their families, which I've done innumerable times in my career. So I did the nuts and bolts. That's the term we use in TV, as you know, and in journalism. I was at the NTSB, the National Transportation Safety Board's news conference on Saturday. And I was actually the reporter that asked this question. And maybe it seems like it's common knowledge to many people, but I didn't know this question. And so the last question that they said, that the chair of the NTSB said, okay, last question about the black box. And I said they wanted people to come forward if they had seen this black box that they were looking for. They were asking people, they hadn't found it yet as of Saturday, with, as your viewers may know, that they were looking for this because it has crucial cockpit information, the recording of the pilot. So I said at the last minute, I snuck in a question. I said, so what should people be looking for, this black box? And the woman said, it's actually orange. And every network was not joking, but they said, it's actually orange. So I was glad that I asked that question, because did you know it's orange?
I didn't know it was orange. I mean, that's all we hear. It's a black box. It's a black box. You think it's black. So I'm looking around for a black box, right? No, I did not know that.
Back too much, but I thought, well, I think that's pretty crucial information, NTSB people, to tell us that. So anyway, that was the question I asked. That was our main focus. So again, that's what I did. We had the mayor's news conference, the governor. So I was grateful that I did that angle. So we were right there on the front lines. They let us a little bit closer than your average people. So I did a live shot that night right there at 10 o'clock, giving people the update, how many people were missing still, how many people were in the hospital, how many were dead. And then last night, I worked the night shift. So again, I was the lead story last night. And I had the NTSB the PR person. So I guess NBC Nightly News was the first station network to report that they had found the orange box. And so I As soon as we heard that, no other local station, I called the PR person, and we were able to confirm that, yes, they did indeed find it. Anyway, I'm giving you a lot of information, but I was a bit overwhelmed because I had grown up in inner city Philly. And so I was very close to that neighborhood. If people are familiar at all with Northeast Philadelphia, I grew up in a neighborhood 15 minutes from there. My sister still lives 10 minutes from that neighborhood. My dad, 20 minutes. People, I worked all over the country, Minneapolis, Atlanta, Kentucky, Indiana. People were calling me, texting me, is your family okay? So, Flora, when you cover these stories, they're my people. And so I was really nervous when they told me I had to go out to this neighborhood, that I would know somebody or have to talk to somebody. And I actually put on Facebook Saturday afternoon before I went out to this story. And I'm always very sensitive about it. And I pride myself when I do these stories. And people don't realize this. And I got a snippy comment on Facebook about it. I said, if you know any victims or you know anybody affected by this tragedy, please reach out to me. We'd love to talk to them, even off camera, because I really pride myself on being sensitive on these stories and not shoving a microphone in someone's face. And most people were very, very complimentary. Ellen, you're a great person to cover this. You're very empathetic. But one person said, too soon. You shouldn't be doing this. And I thought, Flora, how many times have you covered these stories where 9 times out of 10 people don't want to talk, but that one time it's a catharsis for people, or we could help people raise money for a GoFundMe to help a family in need. These people in Northeast Philly, in this 4 or 5 block radius where this plane fell, they've lost so much. So I'm rambling here because I could talk to you all day about this, but this is just what I just wanted to tell you what I dealt with initially.
Well, I asked the question I wanted to know, and you brought up so many points. When I was watching this Friday night, you said, oh, God, I'm so glad that I wasn't out there. What did I do? I texted you Friday night.
You did.
And I said, are you okay? Because as I was watching this, I was feeling for the families. I was feeling for that little girl on the plane. I was looking at the devastation and thinking, oh my God, I used to work in Philadelphia. I worked for Action News down there, and I covered stories in that neighborhood. I know that whole area, but I reached out to you because I'm thinking, oh my God, Ellen, are you in the middle of this?
Oh my God. Yeah.
And you brought up another point. We don't take pride in this. We don't enjoy this. And I think people think, oh, there are those reporters out on the scene sticking microphones in people's faces. This is not something that we like to do, but we have to do it. It is part of our job. And it's so difficult just to go out there when something like this happens. And you brought up a point there. Now, this hit so close to home for you. These are your people. And my neighbor down the street, I was talking to her about it. She's like, I grew up in that neighborhood. I mean, that's where I hung out. And for you then to have to report on something and then report on something that is so personal to you, talk about that and the toll that it takes on you.
Right. The mall. So if people are familiar with the story, the Roosevelt Mall is that was ground zero. It's Cotman and the Boulevard, the Roosevelt Boulevard. And as soon as I saw it Friday night, my heart sank, because if that plane, it didn't hit the row home. So if people are familiar with Philadelphia and the neighborhoods in Northeast Philadelphia in particular, there are row homes. And where I grew up is a neighborhood called Port Richmond. And if that plane had actually hit the row homes, we would be talking about complete catastrophe. I mean, we
can't even imagine.
Hundreds of people probably dead. So as soon as I initially heard it, I mean, I'm getting a little choked up thinking about, we were really lucky. I mean, 7 people died and it's up to 22 injured. Most people have been treated and released, but that was one of the main reasons. 3 of my colleagues were on air for 5 hours. They were on live television for 5 hours. So again, I don't know if of course I could do it because it's my job, but I would have been very overwhelmed with it, not knowing who the people were that died, not knowing if it were, people that I knew, because when I did put that Facebook message on, a couple people said, I was at a diner nearby, heard it shake, some friends of mine. So it is very difficult to cover, as you said, stories that you are so close to, because I have covered other tragedies that we can get into this as we continue to talk, but people don't realize you're human because a few vultures, as we call them in our field or any field, give us a bad name, right?
Yeah, no matter what you do, right? Somebody's going to say something negative. Somebody's going to lob some whatever comment. It's our job. I mean, as reporters, it is our job to go out there and look at this situation and go on air, and we have to have a poker face.
Yeah.
We have to have a poker face. We have to show zero emotion. Meantime, we're dying inside.
Yeah.
I mean, it affects us just like it affects everyone else. And I know, so many times when I would be out on different tragic situations or, reading copy in the studio with just a lump in my throat because it takes a toll. And you are out there for 2 days. Looking at all of this and thinking, oh my God, this is my neighborhood. These are my people. This is my family. Talk to us about the level of emotional exhaustion when you get home at the end of that shift and you got home Saturday night and you thought to yourself, damn, I got to go back out there Sunday and do this all over again. What goes through your mind and how do you pull yourself back together to do it all over again the next day?
Yeah, that's a great question. Well, this is why when I get home, I think I got home, we were on late Saturday night. We had a basketball game on. So I got home later than I normally would even. I think I got home around midnight. And I can't just shut it off and go to bed. I have to watch The Office or Friends, or I have to watch a comedy, right? I have to unwind and watch something fun and light. And I didn't go to bed till I think almost 3 a.m. because I could not go to bed. So then it's a cycle, right? Then I didn't get up till a little bit later. And I told one of the guys when I got to work on Sunday, I think it was somebody in the engineering department, and he was really kind. He said, good job last night, Ellen. Are you okay? And I said, yeah, I have to tell you, I didn't want to come back today because again, the 23-year-old Ellen would have, I can't wait to go back. But now I'm just like, oh, but you just do it. And it was fine. And I work with great people and we're all very supportive, but you have to have a sense of humor about it. And not that we talked about this when we talked on the phone, you and I, that you're not downplaying the situation. You're not discarding anybody's feelings or, discounting them. But you have to have a thick skin and a sense of humor with your colleagues and people from the other TV stations or radio or newspaper or the police even. We joke with police officers on crime scenes and you just, not that you're making fun of the situation, but you have to have a sense of humor about things to get through it.
Well, you know what? It's a coping skill.
Yes.
You're trying to cope. So as you say, you have to have a sense of humor. Otherwise, it's going to eat you up alive and you can't do your job because we are supposed to just stand there, be stoic, have this poker face, give the facts, and not break down, even though you're breaking down inside. It is a coping skill. It's the only way you need to do these things to get through your day, because otherwise, if you start focusing and thinking about, oh my God, I just saw this child. Oh my God, this house is destroyed. You can't focus at that point. And when you're on the air, and I want you to talk to us about that, you're live on the air and all this stuff is going on. You got to block it out, right? You got to have blinders on. You got to block everything out and just focus and be laser focused. So I know when I was out in the field and all these people, I had this ability to block stuff out. And even in the newsroom, you know how loud it gets in a newsroom and people are, I would block everybody out because you need to focus. What do you do when you're in that situation? And all these things are going on around you and you've just witnessed this horrific scene. I mean, I'm not there. I'm seeing the video and I'm seeing the pictures. It looks like a war zone there. There's no other way to describe it.
Right. Well, again, I wasn't there Friday night. So I wasn't there when all that was going on. I was there, thank God, after it. So it wasn't.
Picture the aftermath, Ellen. It still looks like a war zone.
Yeah. No. And again, like you said, I just focus on the job and getting it done. And I am very emotional. I'm very emotional away from the job. I'm an emotional person anyway, but that makes me good. And I'm just going to brag for a minute. That makes me good at my job. I've hugged people. That's how I'm real. That's how I get good interviews. The photographers will make fun of me, but they're like, Ellen can get anybody to talk because I know I'm empathetic, and people will open up to me because I know that I'm genuine. And that's why I do believe I get good interviews. So
well, you're showing warmth. You know, people think, oh, you're so cold hearted.
No.
How can you do that? Yeah. We're not.
And you said you have to be so stoic and cold. I'm actually not. And I wear my heart on my sleeve, but then I can be really tough when I need to be. And so I'm a real walking dichotomy. My girlfriend always says there's no black or white with me, or there's no gray, there's just black or white. But in this job, you have to, like you said, be very stoic and cold, but then very empathetic and understanding when you need to be. But what your question was, is when I'm getting ready to do a live shot, like last night at 10, there were two of us. There were two reporters. So I was the lead with the nuts and bolts and the investigation. And then the other woman had interviewed someone whose family, someone is still missing.
Yeah.
I was glad I didn't do that story last night. I felt so bad for her. And I actually put a picture of the four of us on Instagram and Facebook, just saying, I'm blessed to work with people like this during these tough stories. And we were smiling and you know, she said, you know, should we put this on that we're smiling? I'm like, yeah, it shows that we're human and that the four of us, the two photographers and the two reporters, got each other through this. So I had no problem putting that on, but I think that was an example of what you're talking about, how we get through this. And I thought it was a lovely picture.
Yeah, you have to. You've got to do what you got to do to get through it. You brought something else up before, you know, you said the 23-year-old you know, and the 23-year-old me too, man. I'm running down the street. I'm chasing after people, running in high heels. You want to get the story. But the older you get, and I'll tell you what was a game changer for me. When I became a mom, holy smokes.
Yes.
Everything just affects you differently, and your level of empathy just, you know, it goes through the roof. I remember when my son was 2 years old and I was on the anchor desk and I had to read a story about a 2-year-old drowning, you know, in the background or in the backyard swimming pool. And I'll tell you what, I just was like doing everything in my power not to break down as I'm reading this story, because you automatically make that connection. You're like, that poor mother, you know, that poor mom of this 2-year-old. I have a 2-year-old. If it could happen to her, it could happen to my son. And I know you have 2 kids, and I'm sure this has impacted you, and you're looking at things differently as well.
Yeah, we talked the other night about this past summer, not this summer, 2 summers ago. There was a story here locally. There was a flash flood. And it was the first time that I really broke down on the air. And I didn't cry, but I really caught myself. And I told you that my dad called and said, were you okay? Are you okay? You really looked emotional. But it was a story where 5 people in a car, a mom, a dad, a grandmom, and 2 young kids, 3 and not even 1. And this flash flood came out of nowhere. They were visiting from North Carolina. They were going to a barbecue. I'm getting emotional talking about it. The mom died trying to save the 2 kids. The mom and the 2 kids died. The grandmom survived, and the dad. And I just couldn't stop thinking about it. And I really had a hard time with that one on air. And I even said on air, you know, I had to take a pause, and I got emotional. And I said, the story's really, I'm getting emotional. The story's really affecting me. And the anchor said, Ellen, I'm right there with you. This story really has affected so many of us. And they never found the little boy's body. And it's just that story, I guess, because I'm older and my kids are older, and that story affected so many people because I was at Columbine. I told you this. I was at Columbine for a week, and I didn't have kids at the time. I was in Minneapolis, and they sent me to Columbine for 5 days to help our Denver sister station. And that was overwhelming. And I didn't have kids at the time. And I went back to my hotel room and cried every night. And I can't imagine having covered that if I had had children. So this is a great podcast to do because I don't think people have any idea what reporters deal with. They think you just you have ice in your veins, right? But
yeah, they think, oh, who does your hair and who does your makeup and where do you buy your clothes? And like, yeah, that stuff's important. But when you're in, covering tragedies like this, that's the last thing you're thinking about, at least from our end. And, you talked about.
It's a superficial business. You still, like last night, I still had to like.
It is. Yeah. You have to, because unfortunately people see first and they hear second. And if they don't like what they see, oh, Ellen looks bad. Well, of course she looks bad. She's in the middle of a war zone. But there's this judgment that comes with it that they're all concerned about. Oh, she didn't look good. Well, okay. Yeah, of course we didn't look good.
We're very superficial and rude. But yeah, you still
it's tough. It's tough.
Look and sound nice, right? Newspaper reporters don't have that.
Or radio reporters, they don't have to worry about that either. You talked about getting emotional. I don't think that's a bad thing. I think that it shows that you're human. And I remember one time, this is just, and I'm good friends with this woman now. Her daughter, she got a phone call that her daughter had cardiac arrest at college. And her daughter was in Wilkes-Barre, and she just jumped in the car and just drove. And unfortunately, her daughter passed away. And I had to go and interview her and talk to her. And at that time, I had just dropped my son off at college. And so I'm thinking, oh my God, this poor woman, she thinks her daughter's at college and her daughter's okay. And she dies and I've just dropped and again, I'm thinking, if it could happen to her, is it going to happen to my son? And I cried through the whole interview. I felt so unprofessional. Now, thank God the interview wasn't live. It was tape and then we turned the story around later. And I thought to myself, how unprofessional. And I apologized to her. So she's not crying and I'm bawling through this whole interview because my heart is hurting for her. And I said to her, I'm so sorry. I mean, this is so unprofessional. And she said, you have no reason to apologize.
She probably appreciated your
She did. She did. And the other thing that strikes me about this whole thing that's going on in Philadelphia, you've got this football team that's about ready to play in the Super Bowl. And this is a time when the city should be celebrating. And it's just cast this whole shadow on this. And you even said to me, I thought I was going to go into work and cover a happy story about the Eagles going to the Super Bowl and maybe talk to some fans. And what's the tone in the city right now?
Well, I have an interesting behind the scenes anecdote about that. So I usually don't work Saturdays. I always work Sundays, but I was filling in for someone. So I was thinking all weekend I'm going to be covering fun Eagles pep rallies and Eagles stories. Who knew this would be happening? So we do a 2:45 Zoom meeting on Sundays as I'm driving in. And so we have 17 people in New Orleans right now for the Super Bowl. 3 on-air talent from the morning show, 3 from the night crew, photographers, producers, EPs, like 17 people. They had planned on wall-to-wall Eagles coverage last night. So the main anchor, they had planned to do I'm trying to explain this in lay terms. So they plan to do a double shot with the main anchor in New Orleans in a box and the main anchor here in a box to start the show. Hey, look at this guy. And they were like, we can't do that. We cannot do that with this awful tragedy happening. So I just hope people, and I don't think the average person has any idea of the thought that goes into planning something like that and how sensitive most TV stations try to be. So instead of Jason Martinez, our main anchor, hey, we're here in New Orleans. No, they did not start with that. They mentioned it, they started right away with the tragedy. Then we have team coverage. We have Ellen and Kelly. And then they started with me with the lead story. Then they went to Kelly. Then they segued into a couple other stories. And then, hey, we're here in New Orleans. We have all this team coverage, fun. So the whole plan, of course, was flipped. Because you can't, but that was supposed to be the plan. Like you're saying, this so much excitement and so much energy was supposed to be happening last night and the whole week. But of course, things are so different now. Of course, people are still excited, but it's not, it's taking a little bit of a back burner. Of course, it'll build again, I'm sure, mid to late week, but
yeah, it's tough. It's tough, but we're not vultures.
Right.
We're not vultures. We are very mindful and sensitive, and we do think about these things. And, you and I, we could talk for 3 days. But as we wrap this up, what are some of your final thoughts that you want people to know about the situation in Philly and just how all of this affects us? And it does take a toll on us.
Yeah, I just hope that I think most people do understand that most of us are very kind-hearted, normal people just trying to tell the stories and don't run up to people with microphones and shove them in their face when they're at their lowest, most vulnerable points. I have never done that. I usually always go up to somebody without the microphone, ask them first or call them or reach out to them on social media. Most responsible journalists do that, and the people who don't give us all a bad name, right? So
yeah.
I hope that most people understand that that's how most responsible reporters operate. And I had a news director once in Minneapolis. I called somebody on the phone and gave them my spiel, like, I'm so sorry. And when I say spiel, I just mean this is what I normally say because I don't ever do that. Like, I'm so sorry for your loss. If you have any interest in talking to us about it, I'd love to talk to you. It was the wrong number, but he called my news director and said, I'm not this woman's dad, but if I were, I want you to know how kind Ellen was and I would talk to her. And I'm getting choked up thinking about it just because I pride myself on that. And, and that's why I do think I get good interviews because I'll repeat it, that I'm real, but I hope people understand that most of us are like that. I mean, most people I've ever worked with are like that. And that we care, and I'm getting filled up because I covered a lot of things and I've seen a lot of tragedies. Like, oh, you're making me cry.
Get it together, Ellen. Get it together, Ellen.
I've seen a lot of sadness. I've interviewed a lot. My brother's a priest, and he always says that this is my ministry, and I'm sure it was your ministry as well. Like, I don't cure people with illness, but a lot of people just want to talk. A lot of people just want to, hug them and tell them, and they want their story out there. And it's like, I think if we've done any good over the years, Flora, it's, I hope we have. I can't believe you made me cry.
Well, that was not my intent. I did not want to make you cry. And you bring up an interesting point. People want to talk. They want to tell their story. They want people to know, about their loved one or their family member. And a lot of times it's a way for them to heal.
Yes.
And it's part of the grieving process. So please don't think, we're shoving a microphone in somebody's face and we're forcing them to do this. We approach it with kindness.
Yes.
We approach it with empathy. We approach it with sympathy. And I've never, ever, when somebody says, I don't want to talk, I'm like, okay, I understand. I understand.
Or sometimes they just want to give a picture to say, I want people to know they were a person and not just a statistic or a number, right? So a lot of times they just want to do that. And again, I teach my kids this in life. All somebody can say is no. But that's right. That one time out of 10, people are like, yeah, I want to talk. So that's all we can do. So thank you for having me. And thank you for all you've done over the years as well.
And kudos to you, my friend, for being just a tremendous human being, showing compassion. You've been thrust into a really bad situation, and you handled it with dignity and grace like you always have. And so I'm just grateful that you had to, I'm not grateful that you had to go through that. I'm grateful that you went through it, but you came on the podcast to share what you went through and to make people understand that we're just doing our job. We're trying to get through it just like everybody else. And yeah, it impacts us. So
human, right? We're human.
Yeah. Thank you. Thanks so much. And thank all of you for tuning in to Chick2Chick Uncut. If you like what you saw today, please head over to our YouTube channel, Chick2Chick USA. Like and subscribe. That way, when you subscribe, every time we drop a new podcast, you're instantly going to get notified on your phone. So we would love for you to do that. Remember to like and subscribe on our Chick2Chick YouTube channel. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll be back soon with a new podcast.